All right, guys. So this is going to be the recap for the 12-week training cycle I just did. I've been very busy, so I haven't made a lot of videos lately, but I'll make some more to come. I'm going to keep the informational content coming at you to help you guys get stronger, build a better physique, and live healthier, because that's what I'm trying to do. That's my whole blueprint now. That's what I do. Those are the focuses. So it's not just strength, it's building as good a physique as possible, drug free, and then also living as healthy as possible. So this training cycle, this started, I got measurements done right before, about a week before Bighorn. So during the course of the Bighorn 100, where I did 66 miles, I lost 8 pounds in the race. So my true starting weight before this training cycle was 207 pounds a week out from the race. And I put on, during the course of this training cycle, 11.8 pounds. I put an inch and a quarter on my arms. This is all cold measurements with no pump. I put an inch and a half on my shoulders, an inch and a half on my chest, 3/4 of an inch on my quads. My calves lost a half inch because I went from running like 80, 90 miles a week to 12. And then my waist stayed the same. So I got up to, right now I'm 217 pounds. This training cycle I did with just Shilajit and vitamin K2. And then I also do take blood pressure medication because naturally I run kind of high with blood pressure. So I take olmesartan, 10 milligrams a day, just to make sure that's dialed in. So those are the supplements I took. I'm currently on my next training cycle, 2 weeks in. It's been just not quite 2 weeks in, almost 2 weeks in. I'm on 5 grams of creatine monohydrate, and I'm also taking the vitamin K2, 200 micrograms, taking the olmesartan, and then I'm taking Vitality is what it's called. So that's from Pro Vibe Life. I actually think I got some right here. I got a bottle in here. So this is basically Tonkat Ali, boron, some cordyceps extract, and magnesium and zinc. So it's ZMA with Tonkat Ali and boron. So as we know, boron can increase free test by lowering SHBG. So I'm going to go over the results of the training cycle. So squat, when I came back, I tested it. It was 386 pounds with a belt, no knee sleeves. It is now 510 pounds with just a belt, bare knee. I posted those videos, and I'll post them here again. So that went up 115, wait, what is that? 125 pounds we had on squat. Bench went up 83 pounds from 270 pounds paused to 353 pounds paused. And then deadlift went from 501 pounds to 640 pounds, 290 kilos, which is a 139 pound jump. So really successful training cycle. And I'm excited to see what we can hit before Christmas with creatine and the Tonkat Ali boron added in. Like, I think that's really going to take things to the next level. My weight is still stable at 217. And I also, another thing I wanted to test was my mile time, which was 6:20. And that was very comfortable. So I feel like I had possibly a 6-minute mile in the cards that day. But I didn't want to overshoot. I paced that one really well. And then on the last 400, I was averaging like a 5:56 pace because I sent it on the last lap and saved some room in the tank. And you'll notice on the image of the 1 mile run, the starting and stopping point is about 100 meters apart because I ran it in lane 5. So the further lanes are longer because my track here in Oak Ridge, they always have the first like 4 lanes closed off with these gates. I guess they don't want people running on the inside lanes outside of track season. So that you always have to go to like lane 4, 5, 6 and on if you want to actually run on the track. So that's what I had to do there. So that's why that is how it is. But I also wanted to dive into this video with my blood work from this, training cycle, because I knew I've have a ton of logs of my blood work over the last 4 years. I came off November 15th of 2020. So in another month and a half, it'll be 4 years. And I've always gotten blood work because I wanted to prove that everything's legit as far as what I'm doing. I'm not taking anything, SARMs, steroids, anything like that, that would not put me at drug free. I want to show that this can be done, these transformations, strength and physique and health, without drugs. So we'll get into it right here. Thyroid stimulating hormone 1.95. So generally, the lower this is, the better. It means your thyroid's operating more efficiently. I have been at 1.75 before, but 1.95 is pretty good. I'm happy to be in that range so long as it's below 2. Uh, T4 was completely in the normal range, no issues there, which it generally is for most people. It's very rare to see that out of whack. White blood cells 5.2. That means I wasn't fighting an illness, so right where you would expect it to be. Red blood cells went up to 4.68, thankfully, because this is something I've really struggled to bring up as far as red blood cells, hemoglobin, and hematocrit since I've come off PEDs and testosterone. It's always been like 38, 39, 40. So to see these improvements where RBCs were at 4.68, hemoglobin up to 14.2, and hematocrit up to 43%, I am ecstatic about that because that has been an area that has been a lot lower for me in the anemic range. So really happy to see those start to move, possibly from the ground beef I've been eating. MCV, MCH, MCHC, RDW, all those are normal. You will sometimes see these skewed either high or low depending on someone if they have anemia of different kinds. So I've seen RDW low and I've seen all these other variables high, so it just kind of depends, but you'll see those out of range when someone has a true condition with anemia. Platelets 243, that's kind of right in the middle of the reference range. Neutrophils 47, lymphocytes 33%, so generally we want to be below a 2-to-1 ratio with those because that can signal higher inflammation. Even if your 2-to-1 is not bad, 3-to-1 and above you can start to see inflammation. So if I have a much higher neutrophil level than lymphocytes, it's often showing inflammation. But 2.4 divided by 1.7, obviously that's a pretty good range. And those are the most abundant white blood cells in the human body. Eosinophils a bit high because I have literal constant allergies. It's all the time. We'll scroll down to the CMP. Glucose 78, which this is something I'll have to look into more. Glucose was very low, 78, but A1C was pretty much the highest it's been for me in a little while, so something to work on. BUN 24, I do think a lot of that had to do with I'm eating so much more protein on this diet. My diet has been completely dialed in, so I have a lot more muscle mass, and I've been eating way more protein, so the kidney functions were higher, albeit not out of range, but if we were to look at this on a cystatin C based test, it would be much better. My GFR, by comparison, so it's 78 based off of a creatinine calculation. The last time I got that checked off of a cystatin C calculation, it was 131, which is far more accurate because it takes the muscle mass into account. Electrolytes all in the normal range, nothing too exciting there. Albumin, globulin. My globulin does tend to run low typically. That's a common theme that I've seen on my blood work. Liver enzymes 34, 31, slightly up for me from all the training and maxing. Lipids 232, so pretty high here. Triglyceride 76 is good. I'd like that to be even lower though if I ideally could get it into the 60s again, because that has to do with insulin sensitivity. The lower your triglycerides, the better. HDL 61, that's a really good spot. And then let's go to LDL 158. So that's quite high for me. I'm typically around 100 to 115. That's where I run it normally without like statin intervention or anything like that. This was so high because I've been eating a pound of ground beef every single day. So that was something I've been doing to get my protein up. And this is kind of an interesting thing because all my life I've had elevated LP little a levels, lipoprotein little a, which predisposes you to early heart attacks. And it's not that my LDL has been all that low, but my inflammatory markers have been very low, and I've always been fairly insulin sensitive. So we saw with the heart scan there was zero plaque, zero issues, which leads me to believe systemic inflammation, keeping that down, and then keeping down insulin resistance, keeping yourself as insulin sensitive as possible, are the two main markers that are most important for driving heart disease and other things. That's my anecdotal kind of thoughts, which has a lot of overlap with things like Paul Saladino, what he says. So he runs a pretty high LDL, but he seems to be in good shape as far as the scans he's done. I don't know if he's done a full angiogram, but mine was crystal clear. And it just leads you to think, again, cholesterol is not necessarily the end all be all. So I'm still on the fence about how I feel about that 158 number. And I know it's 100% from the beef, the eggs, saturated fat intake. It's not even dietary cholesterol, it's saturated fat intake. That's what drives that up. So I don't know. Something to think about. Iron levels, the iron binding capacity was pretty good, but I always run fairly low on the iron scale. So the normal range goes up to 169, which I'm at 58. So that's really not that high at all. Same with iron saturation being at 20% when it goes up to 55 for the normal range. That's pretty much always been the case for me. I don't take iron. I've taken it in the past and it just didn't seem to do a whole lot. So maybe I didn't take enough. LH 4.6, FSH 8.8. So right kind of in the middle of the ranges. FSH was somewhat high, but that's pretty clear proof along with the other hormones you'll see coming up that this was all indeed done drug-free. Hemoglobin, like I said, 5.5 is pretty high for me. Normally I'm like 5.2. So it's interesting that it was that high while the glucose was fairly low. DHEA is always low for me. I do not supplement with it, but I really could because I'm always in this 150 to 170 range. It just doesn't go very high whatsoever for me. Testosterone was 498. So the highest I've hit since I've come off was 500. 498 is not bad, but I think I can come in around 600 with the Vitality supplement as far as the Tongkat Ali and Boron, because typically when I've taken Tongkat Ali in the past, it gives me like a 100-point bump. So I'm thinking I could hit 600 on the next one. Prolactin's low, which is good. Estrogen was in a good range, 33. That's actually huge. That means my body is still rebounding nearly 4 years later, because it was stuck below 20 for years. I could not get it above 20, which has, upstream effects on the testosterone levels as well if estrogen's too low. So the fact that estrogen went up this much means my body is starting to fall back into that homeostasis and recover from the PEDs still 4 years later. So 33 was huge. C-reactive protein didn't even really measure in. It doesn't go below 0.15. Which every time I've checked this, I know it's almost a snapshot in time of your systemic inflammation, but mine's never been elevated. So my systemic inflammation is chronically extremely low. GGT, I believe that has something to do with the kidneys. That's fairly low. Insulin 4.4, which is low and good, but I'd like it to be even lower. I've been at like 2.2 before. So when I really clean up the diet 110%, it gets low. And this diet was pretty much dialed in all the way, but I did partake in a little bit of ice cream some nights. Ferritin's always super low for me, which can be an inflammatory marker as well, and mine just never goes up. So that could play a role in the borderline anemic situation on some of these readings, but also there's less inflammation. SHBG 26, that's pretty normal reading for someone drug-free. You don't see really tanked SHBGs unless someone's on PEDs, but I'm thinking the boron could maybe get me down to even 15 on this one, and that would help with freeing up free testosterone. So those are the labs. That's kind of a synopsis of the training cycle. Let me know what you guys think. I will do another one of these come December when I finish this next training cycle. And then after the December training cycle, when I finish this next 12 weeks, I'll come off creatine again and the Tongkat Ali, and I'll just go back to She Legit, and that'll be it. So hope you guys liked the video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, check out my Instagram. Appreciate you guys. God bless.